So the two spaces that that I thought were actually interesting to discuss, and I thought we'd actually go for a walk around and talk about them, but while we, since we don't have them in mind yet, I brought out some drawings, some printouts. Can you pull up can you pull up the sites and the drawings that you did do? Well, I'm using, can you pull it up and just show them so that, because I'm, well, I'm looking for this. The other thing that I would go over in this is to say, we're going to be doing sketching, and you need to get a sketchbook / lab book.
And this is really, we need to put it.
Yeah. Can you get these? Should they be these? This is one side, right? This is familiar to you?
Yeah.
Mercer and West Third. Aristides. Look at that big blank wall in the sun. Not too high, easy to access.
But it's not NYU property, right? This is private property?
This is what I would suggest, that it would be easier and maybe
outside.
strategic. I don't know. I mean, this is what we're discussing. To get, I think it would be easier to go to Aristides and get them to agree, but I might be wrong. If we could then go to NYU and say Aristides is doing it. You know,
I think also to advertise it as like, if you look right to the right is an art piece.
Exactly.
Yeah, to advertise it as an art piece, an art installation, and like that has an environmental purpose, but more so for like beautifying the wall. That would be more like to cater to the needs of the building. And if the building is something pretty on top that's like an art installation that's right next to, clearly they're interested in having art around.
Well, and
Well,
it's
maybe.
a supermarket for
Yeah.
nutrition, for
I would argue that might work for community board or for the, but I don't.
No,
I
but
mean,
Aristides.
but the Aristides is probably, you know, what can we cross promote? We could put, you know, I did show you, right, the Signs of Life version, where we could print anything we like on them. Did you pull up the images that you done rendering? You didn't do rendering of that one, right?
Aristides plants.
So,
think about maybe printing some ads and
not ads.
not ads.
I would argue that this is, I've got no interest in
Well, who owns
producing
that?
ads.
Who owns writes that wall? So Aristides is the place next to it. The apartment building. Probably.
Clearly, Aristides is the tenant. That's a good place to start. And they're using the building. So the point is, you would go to
Aristides.
Aristides and start there. And if you can make it attractive to them without making it commercial advertising,
Yeah.
you know, I'm not going to do horrible advertising for a horrible supermarket, right? But we could find a way to perhaps print on all the pollinators that are involved in pollinating the foods that they sell, right? To amplify their fresh fruit and vegetables that are available, or, you know, come up with a strategy that is attractive to them, cross promotes their interest. So I don't think it would be very hard to say, let's take this blank wall.
This is, for example,
We're still talking about this one.
and once
We're not talking about that one yet.
I haven't finished yet.
Yeah, I know, but that's all right. So we could take this blank wall. We could go to the sustainability task force and say, we're piloting how much air quality improvements that we can attract? How would you justify to sustainability task force? Again, I don't think they can't correct conceptual art and rigorous concepts as, I don't know, maybe I'm underestimating them, but the story you would tell to get support from the NYU Sustainability Task Force for a couple of $1,000 would make it more attractive to Aristides maybe to also put in a couple of $1,000, and then you can print up and do an installation there, right? That might be a way to go.
What about coming up with like a template, like a letter to send to many establishments, businesses, not like particularly specific, like, oh, we will focus on pollinators because blah blah blah, but just to talk about, just to kind of sell it and see who would be even open to it, and then doing more like development of concept after getting some response, some feedback, practical feedback.
I think it's a great idea. I can show you a couple of drafts of the letters that I've done for the academic community to say, which cites papers and does other things. But yeah, so
This
there's
would be a really different kind of letter. It would
Yeah.
be like a sales pitch kind of,
yeah,
like a volunteer.
a very short one that doesn't
Yeah.
actually, and can direct them to more information if they're interested, but just says we're interested in exploring and piloting this new system. Would you support it? Without actually asking them for money or commitment or anything, but just
Or
to
even
establish a
cooperative,
relationship.
like would you cooperate?
Sorry?
Or even would you say like would you be cooperative? Like would you allow us to come in?
Yeah, I mean that's actually another interesting strategy that I thought about with Washington Square Village. Do you want to pull up the Washington Square Village example? Washington Square Village, right? This is the example of another site that I'd really love us to take on, where it is mainly faculty, where we would have a short letter of introductions. And the idea here would be to co-opt a whole lot of people, individuals, in a form letter. I think the Aristides one is a kind of a larger installation. It's very street level, very in your face. I forgot where I was going there. But strategy, how would we do this, right? This is, how would we get a platform that will support pollinators and improve air quality and explore new foods?
Are like parks a viable option? Because I see there's so many areas of like just Washington Square Park that's like no one even ventures into the grass area. You could have, I feel like it would be easier to pitch to like an already existing structure for agriculture that
Did anybody try to do anything in a park?
they don't, I'm not a big fan.
Parks departments are maintenance departments, right? They're not research, they're not cultural producers, they a couple of exceptions in a few places, but why would they be interested in doing that? How would you pitch it to them? Given that they actually, when they redid Washington Square, they removed 7 mature trees, extended the walkways, spent several million shifting the arch over so it was directly in the middle. They're maintenance, right? They're designing things for low maintenance, and I had 2 visiting scholars who got fined for being in there after 11 o'clock at night. So if you go through the community board and get a permit to do a temporary installation, you usually can get an installation permit for students. Faculty have a much harder time for a couple of hours.
Oh, that's it.
parks departments are these completely, budget poor, hardworking public servants with no larger vision, no intellectual agenda, no cultural vision. They're not trying to redesign our relationship to natural systems. They've got no impact. They've just got to keep the thing clean and deal with rats, right? They're kind of really on this level of maintenance. They don't see parks as infrastructure. They're not paid to do that. They're paid to clean it and maintain it. So the institution that is designed to be an intellectual leader is which one? The university.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know this isn't true to Manhattan as such, but obviously, in general, within urban and city areas, the most polluted areas tend to be like the working class areas, and I feel like not in New York, in other cities maybe, because they're areas of government or corporations don't care about as much. People probably would have done as much of a fuss, I feel, with the aggie bags and stuff like that, and then the quality of the air improved there. Yeah, I know again it's not true in City Manhattan.
Around Goldsmiths, actually.
Yeah.
Which has a power plant very close to it, and it's actually the worst air quality in London. There's some interesting. There's 2 students there that have been trying to get some. This is actually in London, in Shoreditch. I pitched it to this parking garage. That's a rendering. That's not a real installation, obviously. You know this place in East London? In the middle of hipster Silicon Alley.
Sums it up.
It didn't fly. There is a anyway. That was, but we're here. We're going to take this idea of the university as your space, where you have agency, where you have a voice, where you have a capacity to say, I'd like to make things better. I'd like to explore how to do it. I'd like to build something interesting while I'm here. So if we're here, I think the strategy you're talking about is more to businesses, or you're talking about something that's general to kind of do a mass attack. So I mean, my instinct wouldn't be to do that, although it's just because it costs hundreds of dollars in printing paper and then walking around and getting it and giving it out and following all that up, which is, it is a strategy, and I think it's worth doing. In fact, but I find that particularly for a novel thing, that going in and talking to people, I mean, they just, you get something in the mail or in your mailbox or under your door. Chances are, if it's unusual, you don't know to spend the time to make sense of it, right? To even make a decision on it, But what, we could try that.
The one space that comes to mind specifically in NYU is that also we have access to as students to a balcony is in Kimmel, which I think that one is a really nice space of all student community life, but also the dining hall there is specific to composting. They have composting bins and recycling only, so it's supposed to promote some sort of sustainability. And there is access to, it'd be a very small installation because the balcony is not big, but to start somewhere, because we are allowed to be there, so you wouldn't have to be dealing with the whole issue of access to roofs, of implementing the ag bags on that balcony, and then maybe even having a direct compost system where the compost from Kimmel is actually just stays in Kimmel to create soil for the ag bags, and that would be a very.
How big is that balcony? Is it visible from the street?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I feel like it would be a nice view from the park because that whole stretch of buildings is quite ugly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
like the Max
Yeah.
Library, I feel these buildings really are used.
Oh, it's-
It's harder to access.
And but Kimmel would be nice too because they also promote sustainability, but also a lot of people are there. A lot of students
For
come
events,
in.
yeah.
It's like a very open environment for like all of NYU, where
Right.
like the faculty building is like not really frequented by students. Bopes is kind of like this like really dull, like, you know, like I wouldn't really think of having like flowers growing on the side of Bopes. Which would be nice, but it's not really-
Considering all the interior government fence.
Right.
I feel like they make it hard for us.
Right.
Yeah, it's hard.
Okay, so this is great to think about. I put down a couple of examples so we could compare and contrast a few different strategies, because this is the test of your agency, right? Where did it go? Okay, so this is your sketchbook thing. If you can get one, we'll talk about that another time. And the idea was to just, if you can tonight or today, this week, start to look at places and think about each strategy that might work. I had listed 7th Avenue, yeah. Actually, that was interesting. The on 7th Avenue, can you pull up that project on the memorial blank building on 7th Avenue in Greenwich Village?
Is this one?
Yeah. Yeah. But if you look at it, do you want to just pull up maps? If you, the September 11th memorial, did you see on Greenwich Avenue and 7th that had the tiles, because there had been a little ceramic shop next door, and so it was an informal memorial that was over the fence. And then they've just erected a building there, which is a concrete infrastructure building. It's completely blank. Can you pull it up?
Is it the fence? There's like a fence
The
with
fence was removed, and they put up a big concrete building. That the
7th Avenue, huh?
and Greenwich Street.
Oh,
The one on Mercer and Broadway, yes.
there's also
There's also LaGuardia Place, where the Center for Architecture is, which is a big loft building, which is a different condition. It's more like a double hung window like this, big double hung windows like that. Why and how would they be? Yeah.
This is Greenwich.
It's on that corner.
Greenwich at 7th Avenue.
Yeah, if you go around, you can find it, right? That's the other corner. It's across the street from
This
it.
here.
No, if you go around, no, the other way. Keep going around. Anyway,
Is this?
no, that's not it. Can you just keep looking, and you just have to go around another half street because it's at the corner of 7th Avenue and
also
this
there's.
side here.
Do you remember a year ago there was something wrong with like a restaurant's like pipeline and the building went down on 7th and 2nd. Like it's a completely empty lot now, and there's like a slight memorial for the 2 people that passed away.
Oh, on the East
Yeah.
Village.
And it's like just like this empty lot that I don't really know what they're planning to do with it, but I think that like a memorial that functions also as like a
Right, so
it's
this
like-
is the discussion of why I suggested this site, right? This is actually, you can see on Google Maps, the building is not yet there, but it is there now. And it's a blank wall, And they put in a couple of little of the tiles back. It was massively covered with this informal, spontaneous memorial, and this kind of big blank city building has gone there. And the whole question of how do you memorialize? Do you want to memorialize with stone? This idea that you'll never forget. Will, the static thing, the white bikes, for instance. The addition of environmental health clinic bikes, X-bikes, white bikes. Specifically not to put them statically there as a kind of mournful memory, but going back onto the street with them, right? To reanimate the joy of riding and the continuing the project, continuing the life of, as opposed to making the sentimental dead site, right? So this whole idea of designing what would you put there? What could you put there that would reanimate, that would celebrate, that would
The space.
on a blank memorial wall where, yeah. And to what extent do you feel permission to test your own agency, to say, I'm going to take it. I'm going to develop a project for that. Right? What happened? Why isn't there much more of that going on?
People don't want to pay fines, maybe.
There's a certain complacency that we have where we just don't want to get in trouble. But if urban agriculture, redesigning, reimagining food systems, improving air quality, if we can account for this in terms of health, then it becomes more urgent, more important to do something, right? Arguably. So how would we do it? I also put up there, you guys have got this now, right? You know where it is. Yeah, the Washington Square Village. So these are sites. I'd like you to sketch some ideas, images, planting strategies, product strategies. Maybe it's, on the memorial building, it's to create a special cola that you can drink in memory of these people with a black charcoal. I don't know. I mean, to imaginatively take these spaces and to see what we can do in terms of claiming them to improve environmental health, but also to celebrate and intervene with the barren, blank surface that invites. Where did graffiti come from? Where did street art come from? Kind of claim on public space. This is my visual space too, right? Rather than the polite, okay, yes, somebody else is looking after that. We won't do. Okay, so I'd love to hear your thoughts. This next week, take pictures of places that you think would be really exciting to do, interesting, important to do, some strategy that you think would work. I also actually asked you to think about your own spaces, your own windows. If you have windows, and do you control them? To what extent do you feel agency or control over your own window? If you've got a single room with a single window, do you feel like you can do something on that?
That way you won't even let us crack our windows. Yeah.
You can't open your windows.
So,
Are they afraid of suicide risk? Okay.
I actually don't think you need to project onto them what their rationale. I think it's actually a discipline to not project or excuse it. It's absurd that she can't open her windows. It's absurd. There's no rationale for that.
And there's
2 inches, you can't actually get out of a 2-inch window. There's many strategies for. It's absurd that she doesn't have the control over that, right? So this is the kind of paternalistic, fascist control of urban spaces.
And there's certain dorms that don't even have like air conditioning or anything, so and they can't open the windows, so they're like stuck in like literally like a sauna where they don't have access.
Right. Well, and to what extent can you control? I mean, this is a building that's very unusual, right? To what extent can you control your own personal environment? If you don't want climate controlled in the band of what the engineers say is acceptable. I mean, the politics of urban space and how you are choreographed and comply, we put into the back of our minds until now. When I'm giving you a device and a rationale to say, this is not just decorative. This is not just, wouldn't it be nice? Wouldn't it be cool? This is not just an exercise of creative agency, which itself is important, right? Particularly in an intellectual institution. So maybe it's a campaign of being able to say, it's wrong to suppress creative agency. It's wrong to have an art building where you can't put anything up on the walls. Blank walls because of fire code. I'm in fights with them all the time because I put work out there. The visual, cultural space that is important for students to understand, get a sense of what you're on about, what's going on, for everybody to be informally exhibiting what they're doing and what they're working on. We don't want to give them excuses for doing that. It's wrong. It's immoral. And we tend to kind of rationalize it for them, and in so doing, perpetuate an oppressive environment. So the creative agency alone. So this was a lovely idea. One of the big issues with being here in New York City. Why did you come to NYU?
I originally picked the acting program.
You did? But because it's in the heart of New York City, right? It's not Cornell. It's not Yale out in big town gown bubble. It's in the city. It's part of the city. It's kind of, except for the ugliness of the building, largely indistinguishable from the city. That's the great asset, right? That's the main reason I think most undergraduates are interested, not because it's NYU, because it's New York City, right? And yet, what does NYU do to Greenwich Village?
Completely taken over.
Yeah, the kind of street life of New York City. The latest strategy has been to eviscerate the, if you want a healthy street life, according to Jane Jacobs and every other urban theorist, you have a lot of activity on the street, right? You have retail, you have activities. NYU somehow has decided that it's actually better to make these big empty foyers with no retail and no kind of shops, and just to have these kind of displays of entryway in the Gallatin and in the philosophy department, and so there's big empty foyers. What does that do to the street life? What does that do to the sense of activity?
It's like homogenizes the community, because it's like primarily like only people in this neighborhood or NYU students.
Yeah, what are they?
Because
They're not going to
bringing other people.
Exactly. You're not going to the bar to have a drink with friends. You're not standing outside talking with, right? You are creating a total institution. What does Google do? Puts you in buses, teleports you from San Francisco, the buses that park in the public bus stops, and the public buses have to wait till the Google buses get out of the way. And then, so they don't use public, they take the public infrastructure and they co-opt it for private use. And then you, sorry. Are you trying to do something?
I'm charging it because.
I see. I thought you were trying to download. Does anyone know this concept of a total institution? A total institution. If you're in the military, what happens? You eat in the military, you get military pay, you get loans from a military housing thing. Everything's military.
So that's the Google does when you're paying for your rent and everything when you work. Yeah.
So, yeah. And so what happens? You socialize with Google people. You work all the way from, actually you're doing Google stuff. You stay there. You don't have to go to the dry cleaners because the dry cleaners is there. Childcare is there. You don't have to go outside of campus. You don't have to even go out to eat. There's a kitchen there and chefs, and they provide free lunches for everybody. So
It's like a new system of development, like I've seen in LA, and like the areas around this, well, still considered LA, but the less populated ones, where they've built kind of like a mall that's like also apartment housing. So it's got like your grocery store, you're like in the vicinity of all the apartment complex. There's like everything that you
right,
would
but that's
actually-
not a total institution. And the total, because there's still, you would probably work
Agency
somewhere.
then.
You could work somewhere else,
Oh, I see.
and you would just have. I mean, that's densification, urbanization, important, big idea in 21st century. We want to get.
People could.
We don't want suburban communities where you have to drive a long way to big box cars, places. We don't want industrial parks on the edges. Anyway, but back to this idea of the idea of the total institution. The total institution is where you are totally encapsulated, right? You don't have another life outside of it. You live here, you eat here, you do all your activities here. That's a total institution. Corporations use it, the military uses it. What does that do to a neighborhood? If you're eating in the food halls with a corporate food plan for a big corporate catering company, what's the 15 little Indonesian store or the vegan temple in the village and all of these, what are they doing? They desperately got these little NYU discounts offers to try to get students in the door. And look at 8th Street. Every second shop is empty. NYU doesn't have to be a total institution. Cornell, upstate, in the middle of nowhere, they've only got 1 or 2 restaurants in the little town in Ithaca. They have to provide food. New York City, downtown Manhattan, of all places, could be a very different relationship. Instead of a corporatized, totalizing experience, we could promote diversity, economic, cultural, urban diversity. Why do you come to a city? Not to go into a shopping mall that's enclosed and to stimulate, to be in a diverse, crowded, active street life. NYU has systematically made decisions to eviscerate that. They need not. And that's as much our fault, right?
Because we participate.
Sorry?
Because we participate.
Without stink. As students, you can say, this sucks. We don't want a corporate food plan. They've got a corporate catering firm because it's cheaper for them, right?
But it's also a lot of times cheaper for the students too. A lot of the students aren't like financially capable to eating off campus all the time. It's really expensive.
I would argue that. I would argue that completely. I can tell you I don't spend nearly as much living in this area as, what is it?
What?
It's compulsory for first year students to have a meal plan.
Oh
You know
yeah,
what it
that is.
It's absurdly expensive. I would never spend that much on I don't go to, you know, there's a whole lot of cheap food, inexpensive food around here. And of course, how would the students know? Eva's, this whole idea of what and how you create a rich, diverse, safe, generative, delightful urban context. Greenwich Village is the paradigm that the rest of the world looks at. This is where Jane Jacobs and Robert Moses and the ideas of what makes a city, I'm guessing you're familiar with Jane Jacobs, yeah? The idea, it's all been around here. The East Village, is it delightful because everyone wants to live there because it's clean and safe and there's no junkies around? No. It's precisely because it's got grit and diversity and life and people collapsed on the street and not these empty big foyers. Of a corporate institution that is doing, has non-profit status, private institution for the public good. Well, what's the public good it's doing here? No wonder NYU
Does NYU care, honestly? Like, do they care what they're doing to the? I don't think they do.
Of course,
I mean, like,
NYU
if
is not a person, so it's only a person that can have.
I think that if like the students made it a priority, or like the students and faculty made it a priority for NYU to like make sure that that's a part of their agenda, then it would change. But
Well, that's what we're doing here.
yes, that's what I'm saying.
And that's the question, because there isn't actually, you're right, it's this kind of, it's an institution, right? And as we talked about with Milgram, what does that mean? There isn't anyone to hold morally responsible. It's kind of, it's not my job, I didn't know, it just seemed like a good catering firm, they had a good deal, so we did it, right? It's not a systematic evil, we're going to destroy the urban fabric of downtown Manhattan. It's the institutionalized aggregation, the diffused accountability that we can counter. So any one of us could take it on to say, actually, let's exercise our agency and let's make it better.
Yeah, can
Right?
we focus on, I mean, personally, I'm considering, like, seriously considering leaving NYU, like, leaving academia altogether. And, like, just, like, the fixation on, like, all of this disturbing facts of this institution, like, it's giving me, like, anxiety. Like, I don't want to, like, talk about it for 30 minutes.
Okay.
I can't, you know, like, I know all of these things. And
So
they're upsetting.
the reason why I'm saying them is not to upset you. And I would argue that this is the crisis of agency that we have, that is larger for the environmental context, right? So climate change has been introduced as global climate change, global biodiversity loss, climate change, right? Which by definition you can do nothing about. I'm trying to make a very different argument here. And criticism is really generative, and it's not to depress you. It's to say that we do have the agency, and that we're as responsible for it being a terrible institution, because we're not doing anything. As faculty and students, what is our agency? What strategy would work? How would we make it work, right? I think that is actually the question. And we can abstract it into things that are not to do with us. But I would argue that's not how we can best
Yeah, I don't think
explore.
ignoring it is going to do anything.
yeah, it's not really our job, we've got other things to do, we've got to get through this degree or not, right? But this institution will be like whatever, you go and live upstate in, I don't know, a lovely little township. There's going to be a council that has the same institutional dynamics there too. I can tell you I did a study on New Jersey and the road system, because New Jersey spends more on roads than any other state. And systematically in every township, the councils make, when they've got they're small townships, they have small budgets, and what do they spend their money on? Roads over schools, in every single case. Roads over schools, roads over schools. This is not, that's another battle that you would have to have no matter where you live. You can't escape the institutional constraints that dampen our capacity to act. But I agree with you that the issue is to talk about this so as to explore strategies that will work. To cross-dress all the buildings, to create, if we could get a massive NYU effort to influence the barren urban environments, to actually develop alternative food systems that were appropriate for an urban context, that had addressed the pollinator crisis and developed new foods. How would we do that? That's what I'm debating. The ag bags are a object lesson in our agency with this institution. And the reason why I brought up the street life is because a new strategy that I've came up with on the weekend as I was thinking about this, and was down in the hardware store. So there's a little hardware store. It's got a chain on it, but it's still owned by the Brickman family on West 3rd. Anyone been there? So the other thing I had hoped you'd do some sketches of was thinking about your agency over your windows, and then the next one was to, so they're actually open to it, to design an ag bag pharmacy workshop. So we do a pop-up store, a pop-up workshop in front of the hardware store. And we fabricate ag bags. The idea is to design a curriculum. Maybe Saturday mornings we have a workshop for students to come in and to decorate, to draw, to illustrate, to fabricate and illustrate their own ag bags on the street there as a strategy for manufacturing, right? Which would, of course, enlist, instead of NYU having a makerspace where you can print out dinky plastic bits run by the library that you have to have a card to get into, to do it on the street with the hardware store. It's in the hardware store's interest. They want to support interesting education. It, of course, is consistent with the business's interests. And there's a coupling there. Similarly, there's a little struggling news agency in this area on West 3rd and LaGuardia. Has anybody been into, a stationery store, news agency? You understand?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, it's not a Staples, right? It's a little stationery store run by a family, Pakistanis who have this lovely little handout of life's wisdom, very sweet. Have you seen
The one on Avenue 8 has a sheet of like things to follow in life that they give.
Yes, exactly. It's very sweet.
Yeah.
So we could take our class and the sketches that we're doing for today, we'll talk more about the sketchbooks and doing them in a writing room, again on the street, and inviting other people to also do life drawings that we are going to do. Okay, so this was to, if we can actually think about these things, this is really the positive response to the critique of how do we change our relationships. And we can spend it arguing with administration and trying to get funding and permission. Or we could just start doing some workshops and making kind of visible intervention in the street life to be the change. And I would argue that actually is a better issue. But I want to continue our therapy session because I think this crisis of agency, this sense of what do I do inside this big institution, that kind of alienation and disowning that I know I felt. I got up at the Green Build Association to give a keynote address, and I said, well, I was from NYU, and I got hissed for the first time in my life. It was shocking. I couldn't work it out until we are affiliated with this institution, so let's make it good. Let's do what we can. Let's explore what it is that we can do to transform our relationship. Okay, so there's two more assignments we're going to do as we walk around today, and so we'll just finish a little bit early and let you walk around. I'd like you at some point to walk around LaGuardia Place, because this idea of taking that as our lab space and saying, what can we do here to make the most productive green space in all of New York City? Let's take it on and say, ag bags, many other things, many moth cinemas, everything we can think of. So what I'd like you to do is to go into that space and to find a tree and to claim that tree, to become expert in that tree, and to write a little biography of that tree. How it got there, why it's there, who might have planted it, what it seemed.
This is like a creative thing, more so than a accurate, yes?
Anything you like.
Okay.
Whatever makes you, you can write it as a song if you like. You can write it, creative education is, the output is not predetermined, right? Whatever genre you think is the best way to really create an intimate relationship with that tree. Naming it, and then we'll start to explore who else has an intimate relationship with that tree and how these environmental commons create intersecting interests. Because there's probably about 200 other non-human insects that think of that tree as its home, and start to explore the mutualism involved in those and interdependencies involved in the tree. But start with one tree that you particularly like, whatever reason you have, and find out what you can and tell us a story about it. I think actually I don't want to actually. What I don't want is a field guide.
Yeah.
This is a slippery elm. In fact, there's one slippery elm. The only slippery elm in all of New York City is down just beyond. Yeah, it's on LaGuardia Place. I don't want the field guide list of facts. In the Moth Cinema, I have younger students write screenplays for the silent film of where they have to actually tell the story of how that moth got there as a love triangle of finding a mate and finding a host plant, and what adventures it had to go through to dramatize that as a narrative, because we learn much more effectively through narratives than we do through lists of facts. And unfortunately, most environmental education is a kind of pseudoscientific list of facts and names. But I do think the name is important, both the scientific name. Has anybody seen the film Into the Wild? Yeah? What was the last quote he said? To call it by the right name. A fatal error he made between planes. But I think the thing that most animated my... Is anybody here a birder? No? Are you a birder? Do you have a life list of birds that you...
I have had many.
It's interesting because I study birds. I live with birds. I'm trying to learn budgerigar right now.
You live with birds?
Yes. They poop on everything. The idea is the conventional birding formalization is that you can name these birds, and you can name them very well, and you check the names. So there's a trust community that's built up. And I'm always less interested in the names than in the behavior. What is he doing? Why is he hanging out in that tree? And where's he going now, right? This sense,
That's
which is...
how you...
Birders can have really deep knowledge of behavior, but the life list does not record that. And so there's an interesting, actually, in the descriptive sciences, and if you look at natural history museums, and if you look at what cladistics trees, and much research is actually about organizing and naming and collecting, as opposed to the research that we're going to do of the interdependencies and the behavioral adaptations, what's unusual, why they're hanging out there, understanding them from that point of view. But the most beautiful quote that really justified, because I like to know the scientific name and the common names of things, and I didn't quite understand why, because I was critical of this kind of empty collection mentality that we've inherited from the Victorians, right? That we just collect a name, and dried and pressed and right. My daughter said, it's very hard to be friends with someone if you don't know their name. I think that actually makes sense. Most of why we want to call things by the right name, in order to connect to the larger intellectual history and possibilities in that. So, find your tree, explore your agency through this little device of the ag bag, and bring a sketchbook next week, which is our lab book, and we will do a convention of each week. We will be doing a mini exhibition where we will be, I will ask you to this week, draw your tree, and every week after it'll be some observation of a natural phenomena in an urban context, right? That we will be sketching, paying attention to through the hand, through the conventional and traditional medium of attention to sketch. And when you're sketching the tree, I'd ask you to be conscious of how different that is in terms of your relationship with it, in terms of knowing where the branches cross over or didn't, or did you get that right, or versus if you take a photograph of it and Instagram it and do a nice effect on it. Kind of physical intimacy in sketching something. Why it might not look as much like the image that you take with a digital camera, the understanding that you get of the organism is much richer. So that's it. And can you stay a minute after, because I'd like to talk to you more about the does anybody else share this kind of
I like
institutional?
really hate NYU for a lot of reasons, but I guess I've been at school for a year and a half, but known about it for over 3 years now. So I'm just like, well, I don't like it, but I still like being at NYU for these reasons. And I just focus on that and know that the administration is horrible.
Yeah.
And it's even like when you're on the phone to financial aid and play the most depressing music possible while you wait, as if they don't make you feel good. It's just like things like that as well.
Right. So who believes in this idea that we get the institutions we deserve? How responsible are we for our institutions?
Maybe not the institutions that we deserve, but the institutions that we accept to deserve.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not like anyone wants, deserves.
Might not be a glamorous fight, but I think the institutional one is the big one. It's the big.
There really is no college that has an amazing administration. Like all the people I've talked to, I transferred from another school and there were only 300 students there, so you think the administration would still care about each of us individually, and they didn't.
Right.
It's just disappointing, and it just
So what do we learn from that? That's the.
it's just a characteristic of most
Institutions.
not just
The diffused accountability, the lack of moral kind of agency, the it's very complicated. As faculty, I spent all my life in these academic institutions. As faculty, I can't bear the fees that you are paying. The lesser of two evils, maybe? I'm not sure. I could have worked at Google. But the institutions are always going to be with us, and we've got to figure out how and what we can do within them. So just loathing them is not enough. I think it's a great start. Right?
Yeah.
It is a generative, and I do think it is worth talking about, but with the right attitude, with an attitude that is less about disabling and one about promoting the kind of agency, exploring what it is we have, seizing our agency, even if we don't have it. It's 12 hours. I mean, the music festival scene, which is the example we started off with, right? Is that better? I'd argue not, right? I found my experience of this great alternative youth culture generator to be the most disgusting, misogynist, drug-soaked, violent, horrible context. The Academy's better than that, so it has its strengths. Anyway, I think this is an important issue that turns out to be a really big one.